Acting out. Scream as hard as you can for as long as you need. Scream it all out. All the pain, all the sorrow, all the fury. 1. After a while, the scream will morph either into After a while, the scream will morph either into a cry or into a song. Which one do you prefer? 2. Can you retrace the steps? Can you do the whole performance in retrograde? 3. Can you remember the exact moment when it stopped being about the pain and started to be about the scream? This was a score from the project Perform It Yourself score. The score was created by Anna Gnatovic. Perform It Yourself scores is one of the responses we have at IAI to the impossibility to host physical events at the moment. It was a series curated by Marije Verlaak and Lars Kunde. And on our website, under productions, you can find all the different scores. One part of the project is also to submit your performances of these scores so other people can enjoy your performance. One of the other responses we have to the COVID-19 situation is that we are live streaming events. And this is the second in the series of Netherlands Coding Live. We have, since we can't sell tickets to these events, we have a donation option. So please look at this in the link that is below the YouTube stream. And occasionally it will appear in the image. So this evening's edition is about Flash. It's curated by Joana Chicau, who is with me here in the studio, in our distributed studio between Rotterdam and Amsterdam at the moment. And actually, our backend is in The Hague. So the main theme of this event is about embodiment. It's talking about body to language, words to flesh, the oral to the written. So what was your motivation for this theme, Joanna? Why did you choose the theme flesh?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Marije, for hosting the event. It feels very special indeed to continue with the plans for showing the performances as we wanted. Obviously, with some adjustments, we actually when I came up with the theme flesh, we were pretty sure that we were going to meet all in flesh. At III for this evening. Of course, for the reasons we all know, it's no longer possible to, or at least until this date, it was not possible to do so. And yeah, so here we are, meeting virtually, which I think suddenly became also a new challenge for all the performers to rethink how flesh and how the mediation that we are encountering in this setup may become another way of dealing with the theme. So yeah, I guess we all will share the same experience this evening. We're going through three different performances, and all of them for me connect differently with how we use language, how we connect language with embodiment, with voicing, with wording, with different forms of expression with what language can do. And of course, for some of the acts I've known, or actually for all the performers, I've known them for a while. So it was also a great opportunity to, what I thought would be to bring them to The Hague for this event. But anyway, we are meeting in an online environment that is being hosted by IAI, which is also an amazing opportunity.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe I want to go a little bit further into the relationship between live coding and the body, especially since this is a streamed event. I think the topic becomes even more important. I mean, the live coding scene has a tradition of streaming a lot of events. which really follows with the tradition of show us your screens to really show the code that is happening on the screen. And it seems that often in live coding, the laptop seems to be the main thing that is focused on, which is reflected in the name of the organization, Top Lab. And sometimes the body in this seems to be forgotten. So I think, especially tonight, yeah, at this moment, it's a challenge then to bring in the body back into live coding. Um, so, how do you think that we will actually succeed tonight, or will we succeed? What role does the body play in the performances that you chose?
Um, so yeah, I think most importantly is to understand these as experiments. So we know that we are in a very particular situation, and it's true that actually live coding has been hosting a lot of online events. So that's also actually that in that sense we are not really going very far from what has been done quite often within the live coding community. But I think, and we'll understand through the different pieces, that some of them actually have a movement involved from the side of the performer, for example, and others look into vocal expression, for example, as a form of physicality that then is trespassed through the screens to the audience. And then, for example, the one that that I've also been developing with Jonathan, which we'll talk further on about it. I can speak more from a personal perspective, that we were really trying to understand how the soundscape and how the visuals could open up new forms of filling the algorithms and understanding them through embodiment. So yeah, I guess it is certainly not conventional takes on live coding. We do still have a laptop in front of us, so we're still in some cases gonna type some code and share it with the audience. So we are certainly showing our screens, but I think there is more to it. There's been indeed a commitment to think how the body can also play a role in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe to get more to the philosophical side of Flash, on the website, I have the announcement of this event. There's a reflection on that. I also found some other reflection from Suzanne Kozel, where she was talking about, and I'm now citing, like, Flesh is my body, is others' bodies, it's the space between the bodies, it comprises things, organic and non-organic. And she described the body as a pattern of information, and the body is both a site and a mapping onto sites. And she also indicated, like, well, flesh is generous. It does not discriminate between animals and humans, and significantly for a discussion of technologies between humans and machines. And I thought that was actually quite suitable in this exploration of different bodies in a way.
Yeah, precisely. It is really great that you bring Susan. Actually, I had a pleasure to meet her recently in person, but I was already a fan of reading her writings. And I think it is also indeed it is not only thinking through flesh as what we may imagine as such, but also thinking about other relationships with other bodies and other forms of inhabiting space, and indeed like taking information as something that circulates, that goes from body to body, from technology to other mediums and other realms. And and have that along with a great level of imagination to also think how that can happen in different ways than what we usually find ourselves in the setup of typical user and machine interface. But there's other modes of interfacing indeed. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much the key around these performances also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm now thinking if I have other questions lined up. 15 minutes is quite long to talk through. But maybe we can actually jump ahead to the first performance. I think that's okay. Then Naoto can maybe play 5 minutes longer. I don't know if he manages. It seems he's ready. If I
Exactly. And actually, I can also add a little bit to Naoto's actually, because just to give a little bit of context, maybe this helps contextualizing a little bit the next performance. So me and Naoto, we met at the choreographic coding lab a few years ago in Amsterdam. I think it was back in 2017, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, it was hosted by Fiverr, and we were at the Brakengrond most of the time, spending our days. And yes, I remember that at the time he was very curious about EEG and reading brainwaves and seeing how that could play a role in performances. And I remember a lot his enthusiasm through exploring different technologies. And yeah, so and then we I guess we lost a little bit track of each other. And I met him recently again in Berlin, which was a quite funny coincidence, and got to know that he was actually living in Europe, in Cologne. Um, yes, and then I also realized that he was playing a little bit with live coding. I'm not sure if I shouldn't really say which platforms, as I'm not 100% sure. Well, maybe I'll just throw. I think he has been playing with Hydra recently, and P5JS also, if I'm not mistaken, and probably a lot more tools that are out there for live coding or that can be appropriated as such. And yeah, so I thought it was a good opportunity to actually go back into seeing how these connection between choreographic knowledge and thinking could intersect with live coding. So yeah, this is how we somehow got back in track. And yeah, and I'm very curious about this performance because I've been following just a little bit, so it's also new for me.
great. Yeah. So to make the introduction formally, it's like Naoto. He's a Japanese artist based in Cologne, but he also lived in Montreal in Canada, studying at McGill. And he will present Algorithm Degeneracy, which is a hybrid live code dance performance that travels between modalities such as images, emotions as words, sounds, and movements through a perspective of high functioning autism. And this is actually the most risky performance of the evening. We will actually switch the stream, so bear with us if this doesn't work out immediately. Welcome back, everyone. We are back in our studio in The Hague, Amsterdam, and Rotterdam. You are watching the live stream of NLCL. And now I remember the delay between the YouTube video and the live event. I have to turn off my sound from the YouTube video after each performance.
I think it worked, actually. I think you started talking right on time.
Good,
It
but
was
then
perfect.
I hear myself back after 20 seconds, and then I'm like, "What's
Yeah,
going on?"
receiving all these weird temporalities.
Anyway, we are
I see what you're
watching
talking about.
the NLCL live code stream. This is our response to not being able to do a physical event. And if you had wanted to buy a ticket, or if you want to donate in any ways, please use the link that is underneath the YouTube video. Naoto is pointing it out right now.
Hopefully, yes.
So we have now Naoto also in our studio. We extended our studio now to Cologne.
Yay.
So can you tell me a bit more about what we just were watching? What is going on?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Naoto. I think you already said that. So sorry, it's just like it's right after the performance, and I think if it's a physical performance, you will have like half an hour before the artist talk.
You can take a breath, and we can.
No, it's fine.
Wait a little
Yeah,
bit.
so
No worries.
yeah, I don't know like how much you introduced the work or not at all, but basically it's very personal work that I initially started as a performance in a physical space, but already had like an idea of me performing and putting myself onto the internet space. And so it's kind of blended well to the online version, I would say. And it's, as you saw, like I pick a few keywords that are related to emotions, and then I interpret and into sound, movement, and images.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I exhibit in my online space, which will be up. Actually, you can see the interactive version later. I'll post it on my social media.
Yeah, I was curious about the virtual environment and how we could join in there. So, can you tell me a bit more about this virtual environment? How is it set up? What is it built in?
Yeah, like a technical thing or like a more
Well, maybe a mix of both.
Yeah, because I think it's really mixed audience right now because I invited quite a lot of people. Well, hopefully they're here. Yeah,
We have about
so
34 people watching. So
wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
It doesn't show my amazement, but yeah, it's great. And actually, people who will watch it later, I guess. So yeah. So what I want to say is, I'll continue. So I actually had an idea of using Mozilla Hubs, which is environment, like virtual environment not only for VR, but you can access from the browser and you can place objects as you want and collaborate with others. So it actually started from that idea, and then I kind of stopped using it because I cannot. It's really hard to live code inside that. I know like many live coders are using that, but to me, it's not about putting images, sound into the virtual space, but I really wanted to hack the virtual space, and I can live code inside that. So that's why I started to build my own, which is actually using A-Frame. It's just the framework that Mozilla Hubs is using also. And yeah, I basically stitched everything I've been working on, this virtual environment and very simple sound live coding engine, so to say, and like green screen, chroma key, and everything.
What is the live code engine? Maybe in there you can zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, so it's actually started, it's called P-Code, and it's built by an artist, Yosuke Hayashi in Japan. And the idea is he's using P5.js to create very simple live coding environment, which there's no syntax error, and you can write whatever, and it's going to be interpreted as sound. But you can also do quite elaborate stuff with it, with loops and arithmetic operations. And basically, I started from that, and I added some other synthesizers, and also I added some emojis, which some worked today, but some didn't work. But yeah, so it's made by someone else, but it's open source, and yeah, I'm really glad to be in the open source community to remix others' work like that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
And then a question from the chat is like, how is the dance related to the virtual environment in the performance?
Or the background, I guess, because I was yeah, it's really hard for me to think, because I was inside that virtual environment, but the recording was with a chroma key and like a virtual background. And yeah, it's very it's really like improvisation, but basically the starting point is the word that I chose from the that image, the wheel. And starting from that, I interpret as movement, and then triggers some kind of images, and then I search for that, which is probably not really obvious how the connections are, but to me it's also not really obvious. Like I just pick like some elements. Like if I think about I don't know, there's not good example, but like sometimes it's a shape, or like if it's the word interest, and then I start to think about some movements, and then that trajectory or the movement itself draws like a curve, and then that triggers some kind of image. So it's really like not really like around that word, but it's more like a association, and that's also like related to how I think it's related to like neural diversity and all these questions, like what, and also like it's like if I talk a little bit further, it's also like a kind of criticism to machine learning, which kind of generalizes these ideas of emotions, words, images into one single space, where probably like a Google search that has all these elements in the same hyperdimensional space or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I read in the description that the audience can also give input into the environment.
That was the first idea, and I was a bit too ambitious for that, so that's why like I'm gonna release the interactive version later. Like to be honest, like I think I thought about it because I wanted to make it really like live and people can see it from different angles, but I think it's not really the core of this performance at this moment. Like it's more like personal, and it doesn't have to be interactive with others. So I kind of stopped using it, but it will come in future different kind of performances, hopefully.
Yeah, but maybe you can tell us for the future, what's the most immediate step in developing either your performance or your environment?
So it's like a near future, because it's future, but it's the next step. Because I was prepared to talk about something like really like a future in, I don't know, 30th century. What is light coding? But, the next step would be, I have a residency in Montreal, which is virtual residency. So it's like working with Nyansu. She's a dancer in Montreal, and we were like collaborating. So I think I will use some of the elements from this performance, but like technically, but like the focus of the performance would be, or the research will be really different, because we're two and it's no longer personal, but well, it can be personal memories or ideas, but it's more focused on like how we collaborate in a shared digital space, which is probably like what I just described with the Mozilla hubs and like participatory performance.
Yep.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's one more question on the chat about the interaction with the audience. Like, how would you have liked this interaction to happen? What was the idea that you initially had?
So basically, like simply like you have the same environment like this, and you can explore. Because also I was trying to do like spatialized sound, which was partially working. So I think when I was looking around, it was like following the camera view. But I think it makes more sense if you are actually in that space and looking around and hear sound in a specialized way. But it's also like a question, like when I thought about it, it's a great idea. But if you're looking at the live stream and in the same virtual environment, then the sound will conflict. So I have to be a little bit smart about how I will frame this performance in the next ones.
I think that's all we can discuss now, but will have a joint discussion at the end of this event. We will now have to switch over to the next performance, which will be actually a performance by Joana Chicau and Jonathan Reus. Because Joanna is not only the curator of this event tonight, but she has also been doing a residency at III, or a virtual residency at III. We've had different names for these residencies: online residency, residency in quarantine. We try to work our way around this. And she has been working together with Jonathan Reus over a time and space distributed residency together for 2 weeks on their project Anatomies of Intelligence. So that's the performance that we will now see. Over to you, Jonathan, in the back end of the studio.
Catalog all future names: Urhava, Kaweb, Chinese, LSTM, Leiden, PGM, RNN, Reus. Actors: aesthesis, agency, algorithm, analysis, anatomical, anatomy, androgynous, architecture, archive, artificialia, axis, black box, botanical, brain, categories, categorization, channel, character axis, black box, axis, black box, body, 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 axis, 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 axis. Catalog all future names. Axis, black box, body, 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 axis, black box, body. Rausch. Actors, aesthesis, agency, algorithm, analysis, anatomical, anatomy, androgynous, architecture, archive, artificialia, axis, black box, body, botanical, brain, categories, categorization, channel, character recognition. Parts of a monster and instruments. Myotomia reformata, or an anatomical theatrize on the muscles of the human body, 1724. Illustrated with figures after the life by the late Mr. William Cowper, surgeon and fellow of the Royal Society, to which is prefixed an introduction concerning muscular motion. Botanical and zoological preparations including the loligo with eggs. Thesaurus Animalum, Primus Frederick Rausch, published 1710. Nerve networks in the body. Westlich, Syntagma, 1647. Copperplate engraving of anatomical theatre Leiden, 1615. Anatomical lecture at the time of Peter Pau. Botanical and zoological preparations including the loligo with eggs. Thesaurus Animalum, Primus Frederick Rausch, published 1710. monster and instruments. Biotomia reformata, or an anatomical. Or an anatomical theatrize on the muscles of the human body, 1724. Chinese classification clustering, CNN, codes, cognition, collecting, collection, collections, colonialism, commodification, concept, conceptual clustering, convolutional neural network, cost, counting, cut, cuts, cutting, datasets, demonstration, diagram, dimensionality, discussed, Chinese classification clustering, CNN, codes, cognition, Chinese classification clustering, CNN, codes, cognition, collecting, collection, collections, colonialism, study, discussed, 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 study, discussed. Imperfect inscription, instruments, giant, K-means, knowledge, like imperfect inscription, instruments, giant, K-means, knowledge, labeling, landmark, learning, location, machine learning, machines, materiality, meaning, measurement. Imperfect inscription, instruments, giant, K-means, knowledge, mythological, naturalia, nerves, nervous system, network, networks, neural networks, neural anatomy, neuron, non-linearity, observation, offline, online, ontologies, ontology, ontology building, optimization, orientation, orthogonality. purpose system. Similarity, skeleton, skin, skull, skulls, space, sparseness, spectacle, spectators, speech, standard, statistic ontology, statistical ontology, SVM, symbols, tacit, taxonomy, theater, tacit, taxonomy, theater, ontology, SVM, symbols, tacit, taxonomy, theater, times, ontology, 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 ontology.
Welcome back, everyone. You are watching the live stream of NLCL number 2, hosted by IAI. If you like what you are seeing, we have a donation link underneath the video. That's there. So with me in the studio, in our distributed studio between Amsterdam, The Hague, and Rotterdam, I have Jonathan Reus and Joana Chicau. And what you just saw was a combination of the anatomies of computational learning and the past 17th century anatomical research. I'm sort of like rephrasing this, but maybe you can tell more about how you came to this project and what your motivations are.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe Jonathan, do you want to give it a start?
Sure. Yeah, so we started with, I guess, this sort of intuition that there was some link between the current activity happening in artificial intelligence research and the kind of knowledge building that was happening in the 17th century around anatomical practices in Europe. And both of us being in the Netherlands, we were in a kind of key location to follow this inkling, because the University of Leiden was one of the main locations for anatomical science in the sort of the Enlightenment age. So yeah, we did a number of research visits to, we went to the Boerhaave Museum in Leiden. We went to the University Medical Collection. We also met with the author of a book called Elegant Anatomy, Marije Hendriksen,
yeah.
Whose writing actually deeply inspired us, because she was doing a lot of research into this era of anatomy that was really deeply rooted in sort of the senses and in understanding science in a very kind of hands-on way. And we thought there was some connection between that and the way that the two of us both interact with computational technologies, which is through live coding. And this is a very kind of hands-on practice of doing computing technology. And so I guess we were partly fascinated by this period in history and the way that knowledge was built in this period, and also interested in finding a way of engaging with machine learning that was a bit more hands-on, whereas machine learning algorithms usually are very hands-off, actually, in the sense that you kind of prepare a data set and then you just kind of hand it off to the algorithm, and the algorithm becomes a sort of black box. So we were trying to kind of break that open a little bit and make it a more of a performative process. I don't know, Joanna, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. I guess there's so many different things that have been important for developing this project. Indeed, like from, on one hand, coming from live coding practices and wanting to share the process with an audience, but then also coming from either a more music-oriented or visual background, where both of us are very interested in embodiment and how to make sensible all these expressions. So yeah, there's a lot, and then there's obviously the conceptual side and the research side, where we're trying to understand how, basically, how back then, that is, just to give a little bit of context, when anatomic theaters were started to being built in Europe, they came along with universities and with institutions that were claiming the universality of knowledge. So they came with a lot of authority, and so they would make basically available to a few some this knowledge back at the time. So there was a lot of things to think through. So not only the difference between making knowledge public or keeping it private, but also what that meant in the context of colonialism, where things would travel around and be appropriated and be kept captive in a way. So which is also a little bit a contrast of the communities we live with, that are all about opening and making material accessible. So it was quite interesting to see how up until this moment there is still a lot of different perspectives in how to produce things, and so I guess it comes from many different sides.
Yeah, I see another parallel that's of course a lot of early science was about categorizing like animals and biology, trying to categorize everything. And machine learning seems to be down a similar path. It tries to categorize, as Naoto was saying earlier, categorizing emotions or labeling them. So that actually thinking about this, I was thinking like, well, what would be the platypus of machine learning? When the scientists, like biologists, got the first like drawings of this strange animal that people found in Australia, they didn't believe that this was an actual animal. They were just doubting that this was a thing. So what would be? This was just something I was thinking like, well, what would be this platypus that we are not seeing right now?
Can I reply to that, Joanna?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to claim that I know what the platypus is, because I mean, I'm not a data scientist or even really a computer scientist anymore. But I really felt like something significant at least happened in the popular consciousness when Google's AlphaGo beat the world Go champion in what was it, 3-2 games of Go or something like that. And it was playing these moves. So it was an unsupervised learning algorithm that was trained on just a huge amount of Go games, and it was able to teach itself some representation of the rules of Go. And when it would play human players, it would create these moves that were completely alien. I mean, like no Go player could make any sense of these moves. So it's a bit like, because the platypus is kind of like this undefinable animal in some sense, that it doesn't really fit easily into any of the categories of amphibian or mammal or whatever. And I think that there's something really interesting about these kind of Go moves that don't fit into any sort of preconceived categorization of what we as humans sort of just perceive empirically. And I think that's kind of where it becomes super interesting, is when machine learning algorithms give us like new categories actually that are not derived by the human culture, but are actually derived by something completely different and perhaps very alien. But I always wonder if how alien it actually is, because in the end, I mean, these tools are human tools. So I tend to lean away from the idea that these things are alien, and more that they're just kind of like an undiscovered potential of human culture. So I don't know if that's my weird Go moves.
Yeah, another parallel I was thinking about, it's like when scientists started to dissect human bodies, there was a lot of protest for religious reasons, like cutting open like the body that God gave us. Now it's of course algorithms that are produced by companies, which are maybe the religious institute when it comes to algorithms. I don't know. So are we now laying the basis for our protest, or are they protesting against this, and are we dissecting what their sanctious algorithms? How should we see this? And perhaps also like, what counter techniques did you find thus far that we can do ourselves, that we can perform at home?
Yeah, so maybe at least there's one thing that I know that I've learned from this project, that it's very time consuming, and actually that tells a lot by what happens after, which is the creation of a data set. I think that certainly is something that requires such a huge scale, and that's why we also know about so many processes where our data is being extracted for these purposes. So there's a lot of labor involved, and when it comes to artistic practices and trying to be committed to this artisanal approach of collecting our own data, then we do understand that our human rhythm is very slow in comparison to what these algorithms actually do. Like the time scale is incomparable. So but there's also a beauty in slowing down these processes, and understanding where also things fail, because it's an accumulation of errors and misjudgments, and like that obviously get passed by if you do this at a certain speed. So I guess that has been an interesting discovery. And then and then also seeing how the dataset speaks back at you when you go through a clustering process, for example, and when you start seeing what the algorithm does. But of course, I mean, I think we now see this very straightforward feedback loop because we know the dataset, because we are making it, and because it's still within our reach. But I guess things totally go out of scale when that's not the case anymore, right?
Mm.
So I didn't answer though about the church and
that's fine. That's fine.
But I do think that we are going to masses, and we are certainly going through a lot of religious rituals, a lot more than we imagine. So we're certainly taking part in a new religion, and we may not be giving consent to all of that. That's for sure. Yeah.
So maybe data sets are a good segue into our next performance, actually, since we have to look at the time. I got a strict schedule from so the next performance is the piece Radioactive Monstrosities by Angeliki Diakrousi. And for this performance, she actually gathered sounds from various people, which are mixed in with or the basis for the next performance. How everything works, we will hear after the performance. But I think the stream is ready now. Jonathan has had a few moments to click all the right buttons. So on to the next performance, Radioactive Monstrosities.
Such a racket, a loud roaring noise, wailing, sobbing, shrill lament, loud laughter, screams of pain or of pleasure, eruptions of raw emotion, groan, purpose successes, female outpourings, but sound craziness, non-rational weeping, emotional display, or the disorder, disturbing, abnormal, hysteria, not public property, exposing her inside facts, private data, permits direct continuity between inside and outside, female ejaculation, saying ugly things, objectionable. The voice seems to be at once inherently human, but also potentially troubling to such a slippery category. The voice in joy, the voice in love, the voice in labor, the voice in pain, the voice in misery. These intimate yet often impersonal sounds threaten to expose the human being as an animal, a monster, or even an alien. Female bodies are likened to animals, and their voices have been demonized. Women, as weavers of memory, keep alive the voices of the past and the histories of the communities, transmit them to the future generations, and in so doing, create a collective identity and profound sense of cohesion. Labeling all this production of knowledge gossip as part of the degradation of women, it is a continuation of the demonologists. Construction of knowledge gossip as part of the degradation of women, it is a continuation of the demonologists. Construction of the stereotypical woman as prone to malignity. Envious of others' people, wealth and power, and ready to lend an ear to the devil. Their thoughts become internal voices that accumulate into anger and despair, endless echoes of unrealized public spitzes, reverberating inside their bodies. Audre Lorde speaks about turning silence into language and action. Audre Lorde speaks about turning silence into language. It is necessary to scrutinize not only the truth of what we speak, but the truth of that language by which we speak it. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. For that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. And there are so many silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. Silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. And there are so many silences to be broken. I would like to think of an echo in a more metaphorical sense. I'm thinking of gossip as an echo effect, where messages are spread fast and collectively through a sequence of voices.
This is my echo voice. Look up. How does that sound? That sounds great. Απροσάρμοστη, καταπίεση, μοναξιά, τιμή, κέρδος, εξευτελισμός.
Du kannst mich weiter ignorieren, ich folge dir einfach nach. Meine Stimme kannst du noch hören, nimm dich von mir in Acht.
Στα 18 μου είχα χάσει τη φωνή μου.
We've often heard that women's voices are no good for the radio. Newspapers and magazines repeatedly refer to women on air as affected, stiff, forced, and unnatural. They asserted that women sounded shrill, nasal, and distorted on the radio, and claimed that women's higher voices created technical problems. Some close the radio, and claimed that women's higher voices created technical problems. But the Federal Radio Commission in 1927 decided to provide its station its own little 10,000 Hz slice of bandwidth, and most broadcasters and equipment manufacturers eventually limited their signals. Took lower voices into account when doing so. The equipment that they were using to measure voices were optimized for lower voices by the people developing the technology, who were exclusively men. Into account when doing so. The equipment that they were using to measure voices were optimized for lower voices. Tina Lalonde says the voice band frequencies reduced the intelligibility of female speech by cutting out the higher frequency components necessary for the perception of certain consonants. Some close out the higher frequency components necessary for the perception of certain consonants. Steinberg asserted that nature has no designed woman's speech, that it is always most effective when it is of soft and well-modulated tone, hinting at the age-old notion that women are too emotional. He wrote that a woman's raised voice would exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Old notion that the women are too emotional. Women's raised voice would exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. And thus reducing her clarity on air. Exceed the limitations of the equipment, thus reducing her clarity on air. Thus reducing her clarity on air. It's only often when women show anger, it's not fully appreciated. It's often pushed onto emotional issues that perhaps are deflected onto other people. Only listen to people stay and who
efeito meu, efeito teu, efeitos nossos, de monstros e outros que hão de vir.
Some close electronic and of but I feel
The quality of our practice is always reflected in the quality of our life. We are truly practicing. There will be a difference over time.
And
now, one of the illusions we may have about our practice is that practice will make things more comfortable, clearer, easier, more peaceful, and so on. Nothing could be further
women
from the truth.
only hurted.
This is
that
not forget.
Just think for yourself. Just think for yourself for one fucking time. Just, I swear to God, just fucking try to think for yourself. I mean, you need to know what you've already learned, and like you've been through the classes and the schools and stuff. You have an idea, you have an intellectual capability, but you have to be able to think for yourself. Just, come on, just try a little bit harder, man. Just try.
Some close electronic and but I feel it and women who speak publicly and challenge authority have long been dismissed as shrill or grating, and women only hurted. During the conflicts in Syria, a group of people that wanted to broadcast their own news for the safety of the citizens set up a radio station. The station was called Radio Fresh. Some groups of women decided to first learn vocal techniques and participate in the station. They then broadcasted their own music and speech, but after a while, an extremist group called Nusra threatened to close the station if women didn't leave. Nusra considered their voices shameful, a form of nakedness, that they should not be exposed. After these threats, the women remodulated electronically their voices from female to male. And they felt weird with this transformation, but everybody was taking their words seriously.
Felt weird with this transformation, but everybody was taking their words seriously.
And after a while, they got used to it. It became part of themselves. Women broadcasters transformed their voices to a male register. Everybody would listen carefully to their words.
Everybody would listen carefully to their words.
For the purpose of making their own radio program. And include their voices in airwaves. They changed the gender of their voice. The female body accepted a distortion into male.
The female body accepted the distortion into male.
The Nova Convention was the first time I used the harmonizer to alter my voice, Laurie Anderson says.
Harmonizer to alter my voice, Laurie Anderson says.
This is a digital filter that I tuned to drop the pitch of my voice so that I sounded like a man.
I sounded like a man.
The mushroom surrounding Barrows was thick, and this filter was my weapon, my defense.
And this filter was my weapon, my defense.
It was the first time I used an audio mask, and being in drag was thrilling.
Used an audio mask, and being in drag was thrilling.
Anderson's use of the voice of authority or voice of control is a voice of rebellion. She uses this vocal drag to help her think like a man, to inhabit the mind, the body of a man through her technologized, transformed voice.
She uses this vocal drag to help her think like a man, to inhabit the mind, the body of a man through her technologized, transformed voice.
The androgynous sonics of the still human but perfectly genderless hint at another world entirely. And in ancient medical and anatomical theory, women have two mouths, the upper and the lower. The lips of both these mouths gorged a hollow cavity, and they had to remain closed. Having two mouths that speak simultaneously is confusing and embarrassing.
These mouths gorged a hollow cavity, and they had to remain closed. Having two mouths that speak simultaneously is confusing and embarrassing.
Women only the was tuned. There was a high utterance of women called the loliga, which was a ritual practice dedicated to important events in life. And this was considered a pollution for civic space. If expressed in public, they would create chaos and provoke madness. Some close
Smile for your neighbor in the morning. Please smile for your neighbor in the morning.
It was.
I like to gossip because I am a human.
Use the person's mind. How they construct.
It was the first time I used an audio mask, and being in drag was thrilling.
Women only heard that exists. Women only heard it. This filter was my weapon, my defense. Was tuned. This filter used the person's mind. Have to change the with the humans. Filter used the anger and their mind with fearless have to and only the people stay in home to
the androgynous sonics of the still human but perfectly genderless hint at another world entirely.
Close and that of but I feel
in ancient medical and anatomical theory, women have two mouths, the upper and the lower. The lips of both these mouths gorged a hollow cavity, and they had to remain closed. Having two mouths that speak simultaneously is confusing and embarrassing.
Good day. Women only women that only exists that exists against the was tuned. Still used the person's mind against the was after still used the person's mind after sounds that anger their body with fearless and
women only.
Orality or thought and verbal expression has still a presence in contemporary Western cultures. It has been transformed into a new orality, a second orality, that has striking resemblances to the old in its participatory mystique. Close and it has striking resemblances to the old in its participatory mystique, its fostering of a communal sense, its concentration on the present moment. Striking resembles the old in its participatory mystique, its fostering of a communal sense, concentration on the present moment. But it is essentially a more deliberate and self-conscious orality. Participants of Occupy movement became the human microphone, as they called it. All together would repeat the words of the speaker for the benefit of those located in the rear. Occupy movement became the human microphone, as they called it. All together would repeat the words for the benefit of those located in the rear. Only listen to people ignorance and woman.
I'm still trying to record my voice. I have to change the microphone. I hope it works this time. Okay, it seemed to work the last time. I'm going to try it again.
U hebt bij de Belastingdienst een verzoek om teruggave van onze belasting ingediend op grond van artikel 17 van de wet op de onze belasting 1968.
This is not the dog.
Hello.
With this transformation, that everybody has taken their words seriously. It became part of themselves. Voices technically to a mail register and include their voices in airwaves. They changed the gender of their voice. The female body accepted the distortion into male. It was the first time I used the harmonizer to alter my voice. Lori Anderson says. And this filter was my weapon, my defense. And being in was free. Control is the voice of rebellion. Prague could help her think like a man. Habit and mind and body of a man. Used her analyze, transform, so the still human but perfectly generous. He's another world entirely. Of bodies guarded a hollow cup, and they had to remain close. Having two mouths that speak simultaneously is confusing and embarrassing. This creates cacophony, because in ancient Greece there was a high utterance of women called the loliga, which was a ritual practice dedicated to important events in life. And this was considered a pollution if expressed and provoke madness. Felt weird with this transformation, but everybody was taking their words seriously. Everybody was reducing her clarity on air. The equipment that's reducing her clarity on air. To alter my voice, reducing her clarity on air. I sounded like a man, and this filter was my weapon, my defense. Used an audio mask, and being in drag was thrilling. She uses this vocal drag to help her think like a man. We have the mind, the body of a man through the technologized, transformed voice. The androgynous sonics of the still human but perfectly genderless hint at another world entirely. That exists. In ancient medical and anatomical theory, women have two mouths, and was the upper and the lower. Used the lips of both these mouths gorged the hollow cavity, and they had to remain closed. Having two mouths that speak simultaneously is confusing and embarrassing. And could they construct women only? There was a high utterance of women called the Loliga. This was a ritual practice dedicated to important events in life.
And welcome back in our distributed studio between Amsterdam, The Hague, and Rotterdam. You are watching the live stream of NLCL number 2, Flash, hosted by III. If you have just tuned in, below the video here, there is a link for donations. Since we can't sell tickets to this event, it would help us immensely to fund this and further exciting projects in the III workspace. So with us in the studio, we have Angeliki now. Thanks a lot for this performance.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for inviting me also.
Yeah, it's really interesting work, I have to say.
Thanks.
And I think it really links well to like the previous two performances where we were also talking about data sets and labeling. And I think your performance sort of lifts out how important it is to have a well-cured data set that is representative of everyone and not just the engineers who happen to be working in the company.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah. I do a lot of research on that, on the voice and the mediated voice. And somehow I was exploring more that somehow the technicality of of the medium that the voice is channeled through, it's actually affecting voices, and especially high pitched voices, like women's voices mostly. And it was not only like what society is how is labeling their voices, but also how the medium is affecting this distortion of the voice. And then this connection that comes even from ancient Greece, the connection of the monstrosity or otherworldly or alien voice connected to women's voices, and then the medium comes and somehow affects also this. And for me, it was interesting how I can claim these distortions and create explore them through, and it's very interesting to invite more people to that. And also as I listen back to this voice and then I reflect on that, I wanted to invite also other people to listen back to their distorted voice. And somehow the distorted voice keeps also the anonymity, because also nowadays with voice recognition tools, the voice has an identity that it also private data. And somehow this distortion can also be I can my vocal drag. I can choose to have a voice, a distorted voice that in the beginning this distorted voice was against me, but somehow I can use it also as being present to this medium. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you reappropriate the distortions that the medium gives you, and use them against how this technology is used.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm also seeing what you also see in a lot of other disciplines like medicine, or even car crash test dummies, where the female body is just seen as sort of a distortion of the male body.
Yeah.
And so it's not really seen as something that they should care for separately or really take into account.
Yes, and this goes for sure into the voice a lot. Like it is compared with what how the male voice was mediated, and somehow anyway, it is. I can go deeper, but it's interesting what you say.
Yeah. So I also I took a look at your website, and I saw that you're also engaging in feminist hack meetings. So there's the questions of the politics of code, and how do you see that relating to life coding, like these feminism and life coding?
I think, for me, it's also very new research to go like to really practice it, and somehow also learning more about it. And I see, for example, that there is a very specific approach to technology when it comes to how companies maybe approach technology, and it's about this techno solutionism, that it has to be to give solutions to humanity, and then we have to go further and very fast. And I find like feminist approach in technology has these elements that bring more societal issues, like also political issues, into technology, and embrace even like also more the body and the needs of the body and the problematics and the bias on the body. So somehow I like this, like I find interesting this combination of understanding the technology, but also know how to deal with it. So for example, in the feminist hack meetings, we learn how to code, or like we learn how to work with technology, but at the same time we bring also these issues of the society, that actually technology is part of that, and the language of technology is also another language that we use, but somehow is perceived as a separate thing, as an alienated, like a distant, like a machine and the human. But for me it's very connected.
And where can people join these hack meetings?
Are
they still ongoing?
Yeah, they are, and they're still, like, because of the corona, it's not really easy to make them physically, but they're happening at Varia, which is a space in Rotterdam, a space for everyday technology. And we try to do it often, but it's we just started doing them.
Great. So people should check out the website of Varia.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's varia.zone or something.
Varia.zone.
Yeah. Someone will put it in the chat. Oh, it's already done. Great.
Ooh, wow.
It's going faster than my thoughts. So can people still contribute to this piece? Is this an ongoing project?
Yes, actually, when I did the performance, the platform came after, and I was thinking how it is also to do it online in an internet space, and for later. And yes, it's something that is ongoing, and I don't know, maybe in the end it's also like a composition of these voices, but I think it would be nice to open the dialogue more and see how these people see this platform and what they feel when they upload their voices. But yeah, it's going to continue. I'm not sure where it goes, but it's very interesting to open this dialogue.
I'm just reading back on the chat. There's a question there from Bjarni Gunnarsson. He asks, can pitch shifting still be functional for identity shifting purposes? Perhaps we have become so used to how it sounds compared to when Laurie Anderson in the quote during the piece. So maybe you have to read through all the praise.
I think actually there are many artists that deal with in their practice as performers. Also, they deal with the change of the pitch, and for example, artists that are like that they change gender, and then in this through this change they start to have to find different like voice quality, and so through these chains they work also with as artists, and it is an identity shifting a lot, yeah, of course, and it is already happening, and then
yeah, I think the question is about like when people have gotten used to this, like at some point it loses its power, right? So at some point people recognize, oh, this is actually just a pitch shift voice.
But for example, in the example of the Syrian radio, the women changed their voice and nobody understood that they were women. So that's interesting, even if it was technically distorted, because people didn't know that it is. They actually broadcast it as men. So that's what I find fascinating, that it's not just a performance, it's actually an actual tool that was used to overpass like barriers, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's time to invite in also the other artists to have a joint discussion, so we can talk further about the language of code. So maybe while they are joining in, we can still talk about, since you mentioned you quite recently started coding, so are you also in the while you are learning these programming languages, are you also encountering issues of language in how things are phrased in coding languages?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are. I think, of course, there are many examples of how this coding language started to be built, and what was the context back then. So there are so many terms that actually are going against even this. I don't know. Even in my performance, I see. I didn't use some specific coding, only Python and Bash scripts, so I had more control over what language I use somehow. But I don't know, it's a big discussion, but it's interesting to bring that conversation about the language in technology and try to change it. Yeah. I don't know if I replied.
It's a huge issue. Let's put it like that. Now that we have everyone back in the studio, not everyone is unmuted yet.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
I asked each of you to come up with a question for one of the other artists. So maybe someone wants to start with that.
So
please.
No,
please.
Go first.
No, because actually it's not really like related to the work, but I'm just curious like how we all met, because I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was addressed somewhere, but we kind of seems natural that we're like this team and we're kind of working for a week, but we didn't really properly have introduction with each other actually.
Yes, indeed.
It's true. I think there's different links in the whole. Yeah. Some people know others more than. Yeah, but
it's Joana's devising to bring us all together.
Yeah. So I guess actually now, in your case, I did mention that we met at the choreographic coding lab a few years ago in Amsterdam. And Marije, the first time I met you, I think it was at Warm Rotterdam, maybe, right?
I think was that the first time we met?
Maybe.
Well, that was the first time we performed together in one event.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's possible we've crossed paths before. Me and Jonathan, we also met at some point in Holland. I mean, a lot of people were pointing out, towards each other. So I think, at some point we made it to meet, and then we, start working together as well. And then with Angeliki, we both graduated from the same masters a few years ago, and we are now both part of Varia here in Rotterdam. So, I guess there's different links, and yeah, and I hope soon we will be able to meet in real life. That would be also amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to create another opportunity for that, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good incentive.
Yes.
So I wanted to make just a comment. I don't have exactly a question, but I found interesting. I didn't see before both of the performances, so now I saw the whole piece, everything, and I found that the performance of Joana and Jonathan were really in the middle of connecting the two other performances somehow. Like, for example, the landscape that you created inside, it was so like remind me of Naoto's landscape a bit, and then you bring this conversation about the voice and the anatomy of the body, and then it comes to my performance, and I found this was very well connected, and it was interesting to go through like as a line of a story actually. Yeah.
It's also like very different from typical live coding performance, I guess. Like every three, all the performances are quite different, and yeah, like it's nice that we have kind of narrative. I don't know if Joana was like expecting that or it happened magically, but yeah, it was really nice, I think. And also like we had a common theme about machine learning and data set, which was also quite interesting. I don't know how people interpreted that though. I mean, I think it's not a lecture, but it's performance. So I think it's really up to the audience how they interpret these questions and how we address that in the performance.
Yeah, I guess there was a little bit of both. So a little bit of knowing more or less what your performances were going to be about, but also a little bit of magic, because that's always the
live
exactly the unexpected moment where when everything comes together, for sure. And yeah, it was maybe I did have a question. I'm not sure if it's so much channeled at anyone specifically, but maybe whoever wants to pick it up. So I do think through language a lot, and trying to, or at least bringing it closer to embodiment and to choreography, which is something that I've been practicing for many years in my life. So for me, these, coding really became a choreographic tool, right? And this is how I see that language developing for me. And it was really interesting to see Naoto, for example, saying that the language that he's using, or at least the library, accepts pretty much anything, or it will always interpret anything you say, which is also a quite different take on a language like, Python, where you have to have so many details correct, even white space, like even indentation, which is not really a word matters. So it's quite interesting when we see like how rigorous and how certain languages are structured. And read that and feel that with the sounds that you've created and the environments that you've shared. So that's for me very special. And yeah, I don't know if you want to comment upon that.
Yeah, I think to me, like, it's actually interesting that you picked that up, because I do a lot of like how do you say, like more classical way of coding, that I write something and I execute that. And of course I do like live coding as a practice, but I'm more like towards thinking in a syntactical like language way, and that I also like think about connection to movement, for example, that can be choreographed in a programmable way, in a sense, like kind of instruction based sequence of movements, or like it can be like a programming that you choreograph. That's also possible. But on the other hand, I'm interested in like more like chaotic way of like how I performed with the text interpreted as sound, and also like how I interpreted word into movement was really not anything like programming kind of sense. It's more like feeling, and I just jump to something else. So I'm kind of balancing these two ends, and maybe I don't have to think too much and just see how these combination will go during the performance. I don't know what I'm saying, but maybe Angeliki can say something about like how you like, because you use like Bash, and that's also like interesting way of coding, I think.
Yeah, I think is for me it's the simplest way to do it, because I do sometimes I just choose the fastest way, and I don't want to create a whole new thing because it takes me time, and then I just run a Bash script, and then that's it, it's ready, you know. And I combine Python scripts in a Bash script, so then it's easier just to run it. And so it was the simplest language for me to start with. And but I find also it's more easy, for example, to work, especially with audio, the hardware of my computer, like how to understand it and connects with the scripts I made. That was a bit tricky, and somehow the Bash script was more easy to deal with that. But I wanted to say about the language actually that I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I find, for example, like for me it was the connection, speaking, like I felt like, okay, I'm speaking with a machine, and then the machine gives me like random things. Sometimes I don't know what it's gonna bring. And especially with audio and the voice, because it cannot, sometimes it gets anyway distorted. When it comes back to me, I feel like I have a dialogue with the machine, you know. And I find that interesting, that how this like language that gets a bit distorted. Also for me, that for example, I repeat again the same things because the machine didn't listen to me, so I have to repeat it again, and then it becomes like a funny like composition of me talking and the machine responding. And that's how I imagine my laptop. And but I did that before also with people like reading sentences and then transcribing, the machine transcribing back the sentences, and it was always wrong. And I find very interesting this errors that in between, like in this dialogue with the machine. They bring more thinking about what is this language, or like what is this technology. And more ideas, I mean, more new perspectives. So I don't have a specific question.
No,
I can't think.
I have a question for everyone.
Sure.
It's a pretty big question, so I apologize ahead of time. But I'm just thinking about the theme of this event, which is flesh. But I mean, this is kind of like a stand-in for the idea of embodiment and how bodies interact with code, and how bodily experiences come about through code. And I'm just thinking, the moment we're in, where we're also socially isolated and physically isolated, and at the same time we're at some kind of, I don't want to say it, but maybe we're some kind of vanguard here. Like we're trying to do something that's kind of impossible, maybe, or maybe it succeeds sometimes, and it's kind of like a happy moment when it does. But I'm just curious, what do you think, all of you, in terms of what you've done with your work, and how you've actually, where you've succeeded, or what tactics you've used that have succeeded in somehow creating an embodied experience across distance, across time, I mean, through digital media. I just find that super interesting. And I mean, I have my own feelings about this, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks. Sorry, I told you it was going to be a big question.
It's a big question. Maybe Naoto, you want to go first?
Okay, yeah. It sounds like it. I think I had it in, my face was telling something already. So yeah, I think to me it was not like a big change in like concept of the work, because even if I perform on the stage, like when I did it in a small showing, I was projecting this virtual environment, and I was recording this in front of people and putting in this virtual environment that's projected. And also I was communicating with them through the text, like I did with the sound programming, live coding. And yeah, I think the idea is to have myself isolated, and it works actually even better when I'm online. And the only thing is, like, I want to have stable connection, and it's always like have to just hope for it. And today I think it was working fine. So yeah, so I think to me, concept-wise, it was not a lot of like there's no difficulty, or I didn't have to change anything, but technically I had to almost write everything from scratch, because it was not really ready to be shown online, and also have to figure out how to route video and sound and all these small but very crucial things that we all know.
Yeah.
It was first time for me to perform online in any way, so yeah, it was really challenging in that sense.
Joana, do you want to reflect on the question?
Yeah, so I think for the Anatomies of Intelligence project, during these 2 weeks of residency, we had certainly one of the goals was to explore more aesthetically how we could make these algorithms more sensible. So how could we, through sound waves, how could we, through the information that comes from the visual output, how can we communicate something that it's not just about, the mathematics behind the processes, but that it's something that you can understand otherwise. And I think that that's somehow how you get through more, or at least how you open up a channel between these algorithms and your body. At least this is how I feel it. And then, of course, one thing is when we were imagining, oh my God, we're going to occupy this space, and then we're going to project all over around, and then we're going to have sound coming from every corner, and then it's going to be so intense, and oh my God. So that's, one thing is when you imagine it that way. Another is when now we have this 2-dimensional screen and what. So yeah, it's a different challenge, and that forced us also to think how to create a more depth in the environment. How can we indeed still spatialize the sound in ways that we thought were more immersive than we had before. So there were certainly a lot of moves into creating these experiences a little bit more corporeal. And whether we succeeded well, I think both of us are on one hand happy that we worked further on the project. On the other hand, I think we are also looking forward to go back to galleries and cultural spaces. But I think we're all in the same boat. I think we're all dealing with these questions, and it's nonetheless beautiful to have a moment where we share that with the audience. Like, this is how far we got now, and yeah. So there was indeed a lot of thought put into all those questions for this event.
Yeah. Angeliki, do you want to reflect on the question?
Actually, I wanted to say that for me, it's anyway new to do performances in general, but it was challenging for me that it's actually only audio, for example, or that the people that will listen to what I'm doing is they're only listeners, for example. And then it reminds me of, for example, radio, and how the radio was before even television, that it was the only way that you could do also theater and drama, and then have all these sounds of that you would make somehow visually and not as a sounds, to create an atmosphere or a space, or to create the sense of the bodies, many bodies together. So for me, all this time that I am in this quarantine, I find that how can I interact with people as listeners and not as an audience that exists in the same space with me. And yeah, and I don't know, it reminded me a bit, yeah, I went back into these radio moments, and I was feeling like, okay, that's how it should have been, like, and yeah, and also like in the internet gave me like this possibility that I can invite people online to actually donate, like contribute with their voice, and giving parts of themselves into this more easily than, for example, the radio was also only one way, and somehow I can have this both ways and interact with the people. And yeah, and I wanted also to thank everyone that contributed, because it was really also nice to talk with all of them, and some of them, and having these contributions, and having different perspectives also into that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have one question from the chat from Karina Dukalska. She's asking, how much does the language choice form your work, and your work forms your language choice?
I guess it's a programming language, right?
I'm assuming, but she can only react in 20 minutes or 20 seconds or something like that. So until then, just answer the question.
That's awkward, so I will start again.
Yes.
Unless anyone wants to. To me, like, if you're talking about the programming language, I use pretty much, like, I mean, not pretty much everything, but I use quite a lot of different languages, and also what I did was, well, I guess that's mostly JavaScript, a little bit of GLSL, yeah, like JavaScript, A-Frame, and 3JS. Node.js. So that's just like I chose them because I needed that for the performance. But there was like also this sound live coding framework or engine that's like something different, and that was like I just accidentally like found it. And yeah, actually, I think there was a professor Kuota. In Japan, he like suggested to the Japanese processing community, and I started playing with it. It was really basic, but I found it's really interesting to hack into something really basic and like find practice from that. Actually, I think that's same for like when I play with Hydra from Olivia Jack. I think live coders, everyone know this platform, but I really like it because it's looks really limited, and like you hit this where you feel that you can always make analog synth kind of visuals, but then if you dig into it more, then you can find really interesting techniques, and that's something interesting to have. Really, well, I wouldn't say Hydra is basic, but like it looks like there's like a limitation, then that's where it becomes more interesting.
So you did answer the right question, we know now. So Angeliki, maybe you can also go into it.
I want to say that somehow when I choose from the beginning a language is already forming my choices, because it allows me to do specific things, for example. But and then I try to push the limits of what I know and what this language can do for me. When, for example, when I was working with this platform was really, really tricky, because I didn't know PHP, and I didn't know I didn't understand Apache, and it was all these like weird things happening. But anyway, I was pushing hard, like to make the concept happen. But also I let some language, like I let the language also to like to make the changes for me, you know. So I don't have, for example, if the concept like, for example, the aesthetics of it, like if I put like audio tags, and then if I want to change these audio tags, it's very complicated. And then I just like that I let the aesthetics of the Firefox, for example, to form the aesthetics of my platform. And I think this is choices that I make on purpose, that it's okay that I let also the language to be, like the program to exist in that. But for sure, it affects from the beginning. The language affects the work and the choices. Yeah.
Jonathan, do you want to say something about this?
Well, I guess we approached this project because we were both coming from very specific practices. Like I was working in Super Collider doing mostly sound, interactive and live sound stuff, and Joana was working exclusively in the browser doing JavaScript. And for me, I had never seen somebody live coding in the JavaScript console before, so I thought that was super interesting. And I had always kind of stayed away from web technologies because I just could never. Yeah, I just didn't resonate with them. But then when I saw the way that Joana was interacting with the browser, I got really kind of intrigued. So I think I've been learning a lot from her. So with this residency, we started working a lot more on the spatiality of our aesthetics, because we were originally inspired by this anatomical theater, which was sort of this kind of spatial auditorium where human anatomy would become this sort of performance where, professors or anatomists would dissect these cadavers, and there would be people in the auditorium, literally in the auditorium around them, watching with awe. And so we were interested in kind of thinking about how to create a sort of spatiality. And I know how to do that with sound, but I didn't really know how to approach that visually. And my first kind of instinct was okay, well, maybe we can do some kind of 3D stuff. So I started looking into 3JS, which is a kind of like a WebGL 3D graphics framework for the browser. That's really, really quite powerful. But then Joana was like, well, yeah, but you don't even need to do that. You can just you can use CSS and you can make things look totally 3D. So she just opened up the console, the developer console in Firefox and started making things 3-dimensional.
Very nice.
So I really I find that all of my hang-ups about the browser are being kind of constantly confronted by Joana, by the way that she approaches it in a very kind of hands-on, intuitive way. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of never my association with web technologies. Mm-hmm. So that's quite cool.
So she kind of dissected the sanctity of the browser for you.
Yeah, you were asking about rituals earlier, right? Yeah. So Chrome was definitely desanctified.
Yeah. We've been trying different browsers, and I think they certainly have different they have different affordances, which is also interesting.
Mm-hmm.
With the
different
same
anatomies.
It's crazy. With the same exact file, with the same code, they will react differently, and then then there's different ways of accessing different elements, and that really changes how you connect with your piece. But
mm-hmm.
but indeed, it has been a discovery.
Okay. So they are really different animals.
Yes, indeed. Beasts.
They react differently if you poke them at the same points.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
I had also this experience actually with Chrome and Firefox, that some people couldn't upload things through Chrome and then couldn't play the audio, and then I had to change the style, or the Chrome didn't allow the microphone, or stuff like that, and it was I was like, what should I do? What should I
Mm-hmm.
The cross-browsing parity, it never ends.
Yes. I guess that's also a political question of standards again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because supposedly there is a standard which is then interpreted differently, or some companies just decide they can be better than the standard or different.
I have to say I was using both. For the 3D environment, it was Chrome, and because Chrome works better with the sound, and then the other one was Firefox for the recording because it had something with the encoding, because I was recording my movements, and when I do it Chrome, then you can only view it with Chrome, but if you recorded Firefox, then you can view it in Chrome and Firefox. So I had to like play with different browsers. Anyways, that's too techy to talk about.
I also found that, for example, the tools are changing very fast, and especially with audio, I was using the web audio of how it's called, of Firefox, that allows me, for example, to record the sound online, and it changed name because it was developed and going through other terms and conditions, and then I had to change it in the code. And then, for example, now the browsers, because of all these advertisements that Facebook are doing with having automated like sound coming every time you enter a page, for example, then this is not allowed anymore in the browsers. So it changes, especially with audio, it changes very fast, and I had to adjust every time the code, and yeah, it was weird.
I think auto-playing sound has been a problem in browsers since the embedded MIDI files in HTML, I don't know, 1 or 2 or something. So it's, that has been an ongoing annoyance.
Oh my God! Let's not let everybody know how old we are, Marije.
Okay. Or so I've read.
You will not find a GeoCities page with my name on it, I promise.
I'll better not react to that. I think we have 3 more minutes before we have to stop talking.
Take it down.
So maybe there are some last reflections. What are the burning things that you wanted to say tonight, but weren't able to fit in anywhere in the questions or the conversation? Random thoughts.
Well, in my case, I just wanted to send a big thank you for all of you who took part. It was amazing to find each other's dedicated to this event, and how much dedication it took from each of you and from all of us together. And it's been a lovely evening, but also a lovely few weeks actually, back and forth, figuring out how to make this event from an actual physical one to a virtual one. And so a big thank you. Those are my few words.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you also very much about that. I was like so excited all the month working with so many things. I explored so many things actually, and working more than any other kind of small project I had before. And it was really, really nice to also bring it in dialogue with all of you. And I want to thank you.
Yes, I also want to thank everyone, everyone here and also who's watching. And it's really nice that things are still going, although we're kind of confined, and it's really great. And I think I have like so many things I want to talk about, but I will just write it later. So you can check out my social media and find out my writings, because I like to write.
Sounds good.
Jonathan?
I don't have anything really to add, other than maybe it was not totally registered by everybody in the audience, but at the beginning of this evening, Marije read one of the Perform It Yourself scores from Instrument Inventors Initiative. And this is actually, I mean, speaking of embodiment in the age of Corona, this is quite an interesting initiative because it's a number of scores by composers where you literally use whatever is around you to perform the piece. And it's a really, I find it a very intriguing way to introduce some level of presence, the kind of aesthetic, artistic presence, even at a distance. So yeah, I just I encourage everybody to maybe rewind this video all the way to the beginning and check out the first PIY score and then Perform It Yourself score. and also at the end of this video there's going to be another one, so for sure give that a run.
This will be archived, right? This whole night.
This whole video will be archived, yes.
Nice.
Yeah, and also I have my online version up, so if you wanna, I think it's in the live chat that we already posted, and also you can find it somewhere online.
Yes. So maybe then I will round off this event, and also, yeah, thanks to all the artists. Thanks to Joana for bringing us all together, for Jonathan to help organize all the technicalities of this event. And also thanking all of our viewers who have been watching the NLCL2 Flash live stream. If you enjoyed watching this, you can still donate. We also had a number of other funders, which is the Stimuleringsfonds Creatieve Industrie, or Creative Industry Fund NL, the City of The Hague, Gemeente Den Haag, Stroom Den Haag, and the Fonds Podiumkunsten. That's the funding for the stage arts, if I translate it very literally. So Jonathan already mentioned, I has a series ongoing Perform It Yourself scores. These are scores you can perform at home. We also have a number of other events coming up. We have the Should I Stay or Should I Go online exhibition coming up, starting in 5 days. We have a radio show coming up, which will be at Radio Tonka on June 4th. And I'm guessing maybe someone... Joana, are you guest in this radio show?
No, not this time.
You were in the last one, or?
No, not yet.
Also not. Well, then maybe that may come. I don't know. We also have another online concert coming up on June 6th in the Post Paradise series. And if all goes well, we will be having a real physical event on June 7th in the II Workspace. This will be a film screening, Ordinary Sounds by reflecting on Alvin Lucier. We are still working out the protocols. In any case, I can say you'll have to buy a ticket in advance to make a reservation, and there will be 2 slots, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. And we're still figuring out how exactly we're supposed to do this according to the new regulations. And we have an online creative coding workshop in case you want to code more. So that's our upcoming events.
How can we find all these events?
Yeah.
This is at the instrumentinventors.org website. There you will find all of these events. So we will stop performing for you now. And you will have to perform yourself again. We leave you with one more score from Claudia Molitor, which is called FaceTime Duo 2, Sonic Portrait. For 2 people connecting on mobile devices via FaceTime, Skype, or any other video conferencing technology. 1. Switch off the video camera on your mobile device. 2. Take your device through your home past as many interesting sounds as you can find. 3. The person on the other end of the connection draws, doodles, writes their impression of what they hear on a piece of paper. 4. Once finished, swap roles and repeat. 5. When both have completed the process, take a picture of your drawing and send it to the other. 6. We have made a sonic portrait of each other's living space. You can now switch the camera on again.